From the outside looking in, gambling may seem like a problem that men face, and not women. But the truth is that women are struggling as well. In fact, women often don't get the proper representation that they deserve when it comes to struggling with gambling addiction. Today, we're going to be listening to some stories from women who have faced the worst of the worst, whether it be going totally broke or even considering suicide as a result of their gambling. Here's some stories of women and the specific challenges that they face in recovery. Let's start with Christina's story.
So I'm Christina Cook, and I am the host of the Broke Girl Society podcast and founder of the Broke Girl Society support group.
And what is that support group seeking to accomplish?
So my work for the Broke Girl Society is based on my own experience with gambling. I wanted to create a safe space for women who've been impacted by gambling, whether it's the gambler themselves or their loved ones, to try and better understand how to help support the one that's struggling with gambling. I remember sitting in a machine and betting 25 cents and going through $5 and being like, oh, I can't believe I just did that. I can't believe I spent my money on something like that. And then it would just progressively, I still kind of remember putting a 20 in and betting 60 cents. So it was like entertainment money, like what I'd spend at the movies on a Friday night. I was still thinking about all the money I lost. So I went back the next day. I gambled all of that money plus whatever else I could get out of my checking account. I just remember for the first time, really, the thoughts of self-harm were so strong. They were so strong. And I was thinking how I could do it. And I was sitting in my car and I went to pick up my phone because I knew I'd have missed calls and all these. And a picture of my mom and my sisters came up on my phone from my sister's wedding. And I just remember thinking, I can't do that to them. They love me so much no matter what I've done to them through this addiction. That moment that something changed in me of I don't really want to die. I wanted to actually live.
And what's the secret to staying away from gambling for almost 4 years?
It's building a life you don't want to escape from.
Next, we need to hone in on some of the challenges that women specifically face in recovery. So I talked to Martz. She shared her perspective as someone in recovery herself.
I'm Kitty Martz. I'm the Executive Director of Voices of Problem Gambling Recovery, which is out of Oregon.
Would you be willing to speak a little bit from your experience as to what makes gambling harm unique for women?
We tend to be put in a position to be helpers and givers and do a lot of mental loading, and we've had a lot of unpaid labor, and we've had to have dual roles now in our current economy of both working outside the home and inside the home. I think there's been studies that women tend to do an additional 40 some hours of unpaid labor within families and stuff like that. And with the accessibility being there, that makes us particularly vulnerable.
So 24/7 accessibility strikes again. To further hammer this home, I want to share Elizabeth Thielen's story. She's a former semi-professional boxer whose career ended abruptly, leading to a gambling addiction.
I'm Liz Thielen, and I'm a certified gambling counselor out of Illinois. So gambling was in my life from a really young age. So I had a family that was just really into gambling, and it was just part of how we all got together. There was cards and dice for money. I used to go to the track with my parents and help them pick the horses. I grew up in a house that loved boxing, so you've got the whole boxing Vegas connection. And when I was old enough, that's what we did. We would go to the casinos, we would go to see fights in Las Vegas, and it was just kind of all wrapped up together in family and sport and excitement. I actually had an offer to turn pro on the undercard of Sugar Ray Leonard and Hector Macho Camacho, so I was going places. We held off on that because women's boxing was not yet in the Olympics, and it was coming around, and so I was at that kind of Olympic qualifying level, so we were holding out for the Olympics or turning pro. My schedule was very kind of caught up, very intense, competing. It's a very adrenaline driven thing, so my schedule completely changed. I went from working out hours a day, 6 days a week, no downtime, to nothing. I went out on a loss, so I had my one and only career loss right before the end of my career, so I'm feeling very lack of confidence. And I remember that when I would be at that poker table, I felt this sense of importance and action, we've all heard about action, I missed that, and I could get that at the poker table. For me, more important than realizing that I couldn't do anymore was that I didn't want to. That the way that I had gotten used to gambling and wanted to gamble was really, really sick. If I was honest with myself, what I really want to do, probably still want to do, is to gamble in a very, very sick and uncontrolled way, but not have the consequences. Having that like somehow insight was the thing that did it for me, like, okay, and I'm out. And I've just been out ever since.
It's a well-known fact that for every person that struggles with a gambling addiction directly, they impact directly further 7 to 10 more people. Spouses, parents, kids, friends, co-workers, the list goes on. Relationships can be strained as the problem gambler takes out frustrations and negatives on those around them. Take Sandra, for example. We just heard about her husband, Rob, and his gambling addiction, but how did it impact her?
My name is Sandra. I am married to an addict, a compulsive gambler. You cannot see it, you cannot smell it, you cannot test for it. You know, a gambler could pass a lie detector test, right? Isolation, you know, detaching from life, you know, electronics, you're watching sports constantly, maybe perhaps watching sports teams that you're not a fan of. Those types of behaviors are the red flags of potential gambling.
And when your husband was in the throes of gambling addiction, could you tell that he was going through it before he came out and told you?
At the time, no, I was not aware. We are Yankee and Jet fans. We would watch those games. I never noticed him, you know, watching basketball or hockey or any of the other things that he was betting on. I mean, he really did it very secretively.
How did your husband's gambling addiction impact you?
It comes from both an emotional and financial impact, right? You know, of course, financially, it can be devastating on many levels. Houses, assets, college funds, right? So there's that piece of it. But emotionally, that's the worst, because when the gambler's in active addiction, they are lying, they're cheating, they're stealing. It's bottomless.
Or let's take the story of Kim, whose son struggled with a gambling addiction.
My name's Kim Freudenberg, and I'm a high school physics teacher in San Francisco. My 22-year-old son is a recovering gambling addict. He started betting around age 11 on video games like Skins and I guess offshore sites. And like we knew that he was doing video gaming and Skins buying, and we'd see like Visa gift cards, and he'd randomly make like a PayPal account. We just thought it was some weird video gaming thing, and then it would kind of go away and come back. So we didn't really understand what was happening to him at that point. And then when he went to college, he went down really quickly with more traditional forms of gambling. And at that point, then we realized there was a problem.
And what was the day like where he told you what was going on?
So he had come home from college after his first year, just pretty much had collapsed. It was really terrible. Like when he was really in action, and he was just horrible and awful and mean and destructive to himself and to us and to the house, and just not my kid. Prior, you know, to this, like he was my baby, right? He's my kid. And if the parents aren't aware and don't know what to look for, then the kids are just going to keep going until, you know, who knows what happens, you know, so I think that needs to change.
The challenges women face when it comes to gambling addiction, they can vary. They can vary from dealing with the addiction themselves to dealing with their husband who has a gambling addiction as well. We briefly listened to Elizabeth's story, but let's dig more into how Elizabeth's gambling addiction progressed as her life continued. So poker was your game?
Poker was my game, yeah.
What drew you in about poker itself and not a different casino game?
So I'm really not sure. I was actually better at blackjack. I would win more. And so I would like get whatever my bank was almost down, go back to the blackjack table and get it back up a few hundred and come over and lose it at poker. So I don't even know what it was about poker. There was something, I did engage in some really odd, like superstitious behavior, like knocking on the table a certain amount of times. And if I thought I'd get a hand that paid out 5 to 1, I'm knocking 5 times as my cards are coming out of the shoe. Like just like very, very kind of ritualized. So I don't know what it was about poker. I know that, you know, making it more risky, like that I wasn't likely to win for some reason, that did it for me. It elevated that experience. So it was more like an intensity of experience for me.
So then during your gambling experience, in parallel with that, you're also pursuing a career in counseling and trying to help people.
Right.
Talk me through kind of that situation. Like your personal life is maybe a little more chaotic, and then your professional life is you're helping people turn their lives around.
Yeah, that's a really interesting time of my life, because I was very compartmentalized, and I think a lot of athletes are used to that. So like when you have pain, now I had that injury for a full year before I even admitted it to anybody. So I compartmentalized the pain because I had a job to do and I needed to get there and do it. And only when it started affecting my performance, I was like actually pulling my punches without intending to. So athletes are really good at compartmentalizing, just pack it away, don't acknowledge it, don't think about it, don't feel it. And I did that with my gambling. And I kind of really needed to, because here I am working with people trying to recover from alcoholism, opioid addiction, cocaine addiction by day. And then in this other way, like shutting down the casino, so those two things completely make no sense, but I was so compartmentalized that I couldn't even see how much they didn't make sense.
Did that compartmentalization kind of lead you to view problem gambling in a different light as substance use disorders at the time?
Yeah, I think so, especially because it was something that I didn't hear about. Like well, first of all, I have a family history of alcoholism and I don't drink and I've never used a drug. I'm very defended against addiction. Like I really thought I was. Like I have made decisions throughout my whole life to protect myself from addiction because I didn't want to relive what I had experienced. And yet gambling got me, in part because I didn't know about it. So I had that family history, never heard about that. I went through a graduate program in clinical psychology. That wasn't something that ever came up. I had been in counseling before. I had panic attacks when I was in the ring and I had to go to therapy to address that, because obviously if you freeze up in the ring, you're in trouble, right? Sure. Never heard about, oh, by the way, when you are dealing with these things, watch out for coping with alcohol, drugs, gambling. Of course, that was never said. So I think the circumstances of something that is so hidden and so silent really came together with my own vulnerabilities, to kind of have me end up where I did.
And how did things kind of come to a head? Did other people find out about the gambling? Did you tell them willingly? Like what kind of led to your eventual recovery?
So my life changed. So I met who became my husband. At the time, he knew that I gambled. We actually went and gambled together a couple of times. And of course, I won and paid for our hotel and our dinner, and he thought that was so cool. So it was still part of my life when him and I got together, and he came into the equation with a child. And so all of a sudden, we got engaged, and I'm going to be a wife and a mom, and it's really not conducive to spending 6-7 hours at a casino. So comps were, in large supply because of how much I gambled. I had so many comps. We would go to the casino and eat at the buffet, and I'd pay with my comp card. And for the longest time, it was like, oh, that's so cool. And after doing that so many times, my husband, when I went to, pay for our meal again, said, just how much do you gamble? And he said it like really judgy. And at the time, I don't even know if we were married yet. He might have been my fiance at that time. But he said it like very judgmentally. And for some reason, it took hearing that it was like everything that I had done in my years of gambling like flashed before my eyes, like the financial problems, the lying, the long hours. And I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, I did the very thing that I've said my whole life I wouldn't do. And I immediately said, okay, that's okay, just be a normal gambler. And so I tried I'm going to be a responsible gambler. So I tried that, and I don't even remember, but it was like 1 or 2 times I tried that. Went to the casino, and I remember the very last time I sat down and I lost, I don't know, $120 in about 3 minutes. And my husband's standing right there, and he's like, let's get out of here. Because that's a normal response to losing that quickly, right? He's got a brain that doesn't work like my brain. And I was like, you're being a normal gambler, just be a normal gambler, get out of that chair. And I got out of that chair and I left with him, but it felt like ripping myself out of the chair. It felt like I was ripping my soul out of that chair. And I had 2 such important epiphanies that day, and I haven't gambled a day since. One was that I no longer had the ability to be a controlled gambler. And I don't know when I lost that. I don't know when that could have changed and then remained in my life. But for me, more important than realizing that I couldn't do it anymore was that I didn't want to. That the way that I had gotten used to gambling and wanted to gamble was really, really sick. If I was honest with myself, what I really want to do, probably still want to do, is to gamble in a very, very sick and uncontrolled way, but not have the consequences. Having that somehow insight was the thing that did it for me. Okay, and I'm out. and I've just been out ever since.
Elizabeth's story shares a lot of similarities to Christina's story. Both of them hit rock bottom because of their gambling. These addictions truly had a firm grasp on them. Let's go back to Christina's story and listen to what happened as her life progressed.
I went straight to the casino. And I remember, like, I just needed to decompress, and of course, by now, that was my coping mechanism. And I remember just sitting there, just mindlessly hitting the button. And all of a sudden, my first jackpot, I won a progressive. Wasn't a lot, but it was just enough. And I remember just, like, kind of cementing that feeling of, like, oh, this is good for me. This does make me feel better. And I even took that money and I helped my mom pay her hospital deductible with it. And I remember telling my mom that, you know, like, I won my jackpot, but before that, like, I missed all the phone calls of, like, my sister saying, where are you? Mom needs this, mom needs that. Where are you? It's been hours. And so that kind of just got me out of there. But it just, that moment, I think, cemented to me that, oh, well, if I spend a little bit more money, I'm gonna make money and I can make my life easier. So before that, I don't think I was chasing money. But in that moment, it was like, oh, this is really nice.
Yeah. Like, what was the thought process like? You leave the hospital, you go straight to the casino. Is there a thought, or is it reactionary? Do you just drive straight there?
I think it was just reactionary, honestly. It was just like, it was just like something in me was like, I need to decompress, and this is the place. It would be like the equivalent of somebody who was struggling with drinking. They'd be like, I need a drink.
Yeah.
It would be the exact equivalent. I need to gamble. Like, I've got to get away from this. And so that was my reaction. So I would say it was very much reactionary.
So following this day, it's now been cemented in your brain that gambling could be a way to come into some money very quickly. How does your story progress from this point?
I think from that moment, I started gambling more regular. I started spending more. You know, before I was paying my bills and putting money in savings and doing those things I needed to stay, but needed to adult. But I think for me, as my relationship continued to kind of be this up and down, you know, a lot of harm was happening there. I was worried about, you know, the situation with my mom, and I had learned that, you know, gambling felt good and I can win money and maybe just make myself feel better. And I think maybe even an underlying, like, if I had some financial security, maybe I could not worry about relationships, and maybe whatever the irrational parts of how gambling could help my life, I made rational. I made irrational thoughts seem rational, and I was like, oh, this makes sense because it's what I wanted to do. It's what made me feel better. And I had to justify it in some way to myself.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it started to kind of progress to spending more money, starting to kind of feel the pinch of the finances. Like, now I'm having to maybe pay the electric bill 2 weeks late. Started kind of pushing back bills, started using my credit cards more. And then it just continued to progress until I was probably gambling for about 5-7 years. You know, life is continuing on. And I think that for some reason, it just kind of started, like, my relationship with gambling started to up. And then I was now not paying my electric bill at all, or I was paying it 2 months late when I got a cutoff notice, and not getting anything to savings. So any kind of emergency went on my credit cards. It started to be like, I don't even want to gamble. Like, I'd be at the casino and just be like, why am I here? You know, I'm so far behind on everything. I owe everybody money. You know, my friends who used to invite me to do things like go Black Friday shopping, and like, they just stopped asking me because I would gamble all my money and couldn't go. And, you know, things like that started happening in my life. And I don't know, I just kind of sunk into the chaos of it, the isolation, and it just really grabbed hold.
Yeah. So at this point in your story, you've been gambling for how long total, you think? About 7 years?
Yeah, about 7 years in is when the chaos really started to sink in. And then I probably continued to gamble to harm over those next 7 years. I mean, just debt, financial, you know, physically, I was hurting myself because I wasn't taking care of myself. I, at this point, was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, stomach issues, like, just lots of things were happening. And then about 2018, I don't know, 3 or 4 years before I stopped gambling, I was diagnosed with cervical cancer. Instead of really addressing what that meant and what I was going to have to go through, I really leaned into the gambling to help me really deal with those emotions. I hadn't had kids yet, and now the ability to have my own children was going to be taken away from me. I know there were so many other ways to have children, but for me, I was always hopeful that I was going to be a mom one day and have my own kids. And even though not everything was in place for that to happen, I think that finality, it hurt me more than I've ever, I think, acknowledged until just really the last year of my recovery here. And I remember talking to a therapist one day, and I'm like, I am just really struggling with feeling any way about life. And she's like, well, let's get you on some medication to help. You know, I was telling her about the anxiety and panic attacks I was having and everything. And they put me on a medicine called Effexor. Now, mind you, I didn't say anything about the gambling or the addictive behaviors I was having. And that medicine, it numbed every emotion I had. And I think if I had been honest, she would have been like, we would never put you on that. But I had no, like, I didn't care about anything. I didn't care about the harm I was causing. I didn't care about myself. That medicine just let me not feel anything. So my gambling became worse, and I just spent my paychecks. Like, I would get paid, and in 30 minutes, my paychecks would be gone. I was that person that would be in the casino and gamble down to $2 because I knew I had to put gas in my car to get home. It wasn't until late 2020 that, you know, I really started having thoughts of like, I don't want to be here anymore. And I started thinking about how I was not going to be here anymore. And I think it really, really scared me.
Women face gambling addiction too, and their stories can be just as bad, if not worse, than the men who are struggling. But with how bad gambling addictions have gotten and how many more people have continued to reach out for help, it's important that we give women the proper recognition that they need to conquer this disease.